The importance of education as a vehicle to driving pathways into the economy cannot be overemphasized. We've heard what our speakers have said before, Sizwe, Tracy, etc. We just cannot overemphasize this. And to discuss this very important driver is a panel that I'm very interested in engaging and talking to. I'd like to introduce you to some of the folks on this panel. So I'm going to do it for the sake of time myself, and then we'll tag each one of you with a question thereafter. So I'd like to introduce Notolo Kaslana, Head of Sasol Foundation, Dipalesa Mbeya, Head of Social Impact at Tshikululu Social Investments, Sauban Thatcher, Head of Marketing at Project Isizwe, and Seliki Tlabana, Chief Director for Math, Science and Technology, Department of Basic Education. Welcome to you all. And as you saw there with Sizwe and some of the things that he put forward and he posited, it is important. It's a critical time in where we are as a country and where we are as a continent. And I'd like to get some thoughts from you folks with a question around what is, in your opinion, 21st century learning? You know, we talk about the importance of it. We talk about an African-centered education system. What do we mean by this ecosystem? And I'm gonna pose this first to Seliki. Seliki, tell me your view on that. 21st century education. I think it's probably best for the Department of Basic Education to give us their view on that.
Yeah, thank you very much and good morning. And let me also greet my fellow panelists and the partners in this webinar, Sasol, Tshikululu, and everybody else. I would say it is a term that is used to describe a shift in education to new approaches. And this new approach focuses on preparing learners for the future by teaching them the skills they will need for them to be successful participants in the global economy, for them to function effectively in society. It brings in a huge shift from education whose approach was more about imparting knowledge to learners and assessing whether these children can remember, meaning recollection, regurgitate, memorize this knowledge. Shift toward more institution in society, for them to be problem solvers, for them to be creative, for them to be able to work collaboratively with other people, for them to be aware of the environment and the need to take care of the environment, the need to equip them with digital skills, for them to be digital literate, to the approach that teachers would utilize to assist learners to problem solve, meaning when a teacher gives children knowledge, content, and he or she models it around the real world problems. For instance, could ask children to solve a problem of water pollution in society, for them to solve a problem of transport. So a teacher designing the lesson in such a way that he or she will instill and develop this type of skills in the learners, more than just to get them to remember what they've been taught and being rewarded for showing some deep memory, that they are strong memory, they are able to recollect everything that have been taught. So this is a shift, and this is a shift that is deliberate, and it has to be delivered through structured programs. In education, we call that curricula. So it is something that must be done on a deliberate way. It goes into how we package our curriculum, and that those skills and those competencies must be clearly expressed in the curriculum. It talks about preparing teachers for them to be able to teach this content. In the opening remarks, Sizwe spoke about his great concern about the readiness of higher education to assist the nation to embrace these changes in terms of initial teacher preparation. To say it's important that higher education must be running ahead of us, or at least side by side with us, while we are busy planning our plan must reflect teacher preparation. And that by the time we finalize all these plans, you must be having a cohort of teachers who've been trained differently to deliver education in the 21st century. It includes the role that technology can play in developing and delivering these skills. The world has changed. It has changed so much that the teacher is not the only source of knowledge and of information. Children can access information, knowledge, content in the internet. And if a child wants to understand a topic, they can easily get into YouTube and pull out a teacher in Canada, a teacher in Botswana, who is actually delivering that lesson. So a child does not just rely on a teacher who's standing in front of them. So teachers need to take their work seriously, and that they need to understand that unlike in the past, where the teacher was the Bible, was the sole source of information, and every time everything that came out of the mouth of the teacher was the gospel, the world has changed. It is no longer like that. The 21st century, education is about understanding that knowledge changes rapidly, and that what we knew as true yesterday may change today. And it's important for us to keep up to these rapid changes and developments that are happening all the time. The tools that we use today, we may not be using them tomorrow. So it's important, and this is the biggest challenge for the learners in the 21st century, because they have to keep up with all these changes. And they need to assess and evaluate information, be able to apply their minds critically to assess what is true and what is not true, because of the volume of knowledge and information that is available to them. Thank you.
Sadiq, I want to stick on you just for a second, and I'm going to go to my other panelists, because I want to get that governmental view, just to clarify. One of the questions that's come up is, what role does local government play?
Yeah, in education in South Africa, the responsibility of provision of education is placed on National Department of Education, which in the main develops policies and guidelines and frameworks. And the implementation then happens at the provincial level, and the province works through districts and circuits and schools. The local government, in terms of municipalities, has a responsibility when it comes to ECD, and they provide other services to schools that are within the area of catchment. But in terms of policy for delivery of curriculum, the local government doesn't play that much role in South Africa. In other countries, local government have a responsibility as well in delivering services that include education. But in South Africa, local government doesn't employ teachers. It doesn't necessarily have to build schools. It provides water, sanitation, and all those other services. But from curriculum point of view, local government in South Africa does not have a major role to play. Maybe in future, it might.
Right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. I think you clarified that, and thank you for that question from the audience. I'm gonna flip over. I think I introduced. I think Samira, you representing Project Isizwe today, and
social investment.
There we go. Okay, cool. So let's talk about that for a second. We want to talk about uncapped internet, freeing minds, futures, free economy. So Saibon, let's tag to you. So please tell me more about Project Isizwe. It's uncapping, promoting treatments to this broadband and access to connectivity. Give us your view on that and how important it is. We heard now the governmental view, so let's hear the kind of on unlocking the taps view.
Absolutely. So thanks so much for having me this morning. It's a really critical topic. And just to note, I'm actually a former educator. So I have some classroom experience for a number of years, and I taught IT and English and geography and a whole lot of other subjects as well. So it's quite nice to have that insight and then move into the NGO sector with Project Isizwe, where our focus is really on provisioning free and or affordable internet to underserved communities. And for us, our drive is really towards uncapping Africa, and that's the strategy that we're going with at the moment. We believe that anything capped means that you're capping everything else in life. So if you've got capped internet, which is mostly the case in our communities across South Africa, because everyone is prohibited by the exorbitant costs of mobile data, once you've got a capped amount of internet, which might be 200 megs or 20 megs, you're capping the freedom to think, you're capping exposure, you're capping access, you're capping economy, or the ability to earn, you're capping education and access to what's on the internet. So for us, making access and connecting people to the internet in a way that's uncapped really allows that freedom to flow. It allows access, it allows people to be educated, it allows people access to job opportunities, to employment equity, to freeing themselves. And that's very, very critical for us. We have two models. We have a free model and we have a paid-for model. This is in our community Wi-Fi project. So our community projects are focused on looking at one community, providing as much wireless internet in that community as possible. Where we have funders and sponsors who enable us to do it for free, we advocate for that, and that's what we do. But providing free internet in an uncapped way is very expensive and very difficult. So we also have a R5 a day model, which allows us to get people to pay R5 and they get 24 hours of uncapped internet. We've also got a 25 Rand product for 7 days and a 100 Rand product for 30 days. But in our education strategy, which is something that's really coming to fruition this year, we've decided to take the approach that no learner in the first world or in the world of the haves pays for their internet. That internet is paid for by parents or a school or a government. And we believe that for learners in Africa, it should be the same. So we're going under the campaign of uncapping education and making sure that no learner who has access to Project Isizwe Wi-Fi pays for their internet. We're doing it for educators as well. And we're trying to ensure that that's at school as well as at home. So our strategy is to try and connect the 16,000 schools in South Africa that don't have access to connectivity for teaching and learning purposes, and making sure that those educators and those learners can readily access everything that the internet has to offer without any sort of cost to themselves. Why is this important? It's important because that's the only way we're going to bring about equality. If you look at, what the haves have, or, people who have access to postpaid contracts and can afford a fiber line at home for 800 or 900 Rand a month, that's a very, very good rate to buy internet at, okay? But most people in our communities, and particularly learners in child-led homes or, with their grandparents in homes and there aren't those funds available and there isn't that infrastructure available in many of our communities, those individuals are capped. And they don't have access to what the first world has and what's required for participation in a global economy, or even a continent economy. So in order to start bridging any divides, and that's economic, digital, etc., we really have to give young people in schools and post-school the ability to connect to the internet that is uncapped.
Okay, so quick question regarding that is, how do you partner with the school? What's your selection process in terms of engaging with the relevant institutions, specifically the schools?
So for the most part, it comes to us through partners who come in to fund. So we've got a massive project with Distel. We've got a project going on with Astron Energy. We've got a very big project with Glencore Ferroalloys as well as Glencore Coal. And those partners will come in, Investec as well as another one, they'll come in to fund the infrastructure. So they'll say to us, we want to focus on a community and we want to work with schools and with individuals in that community. They'll come in and they'll provide what it takes for us to get the infrastructure in place. And for the most part, that's either fixed wireless or the link in, as well as the equipment that's required to put up a hotspot. And in those communities, we will then engage with local people on the ground. Project Isizwe is an extremely small, mostly remote team, and we always utilize local resources in the community. So we link in with community leaders. We find people who are, sort of influencers in their areas, and we work with them to connect with the schools. We always look for, having worked in schools and worked a lot with sort of the structures of the education department, we always look for principals and school governing bodies or leadership teams where there's already a commitment to progress around technology, We know that majority of South African schools still have policies where learners aren't encouraged to bring their devices to school, as an example, for many reasons, many good, many, some bad. And we try to work with the principals and say, well, if you put the right leadership structures in place, and if you empower your teachers correctly with the right skills and the right knowledge to be able to work with technology and learners in the classroom environment, then technology becomes an enabler and it advances education. So a lot of that is sort of leadership development work that we have to do with the schools, with the educators, and helps us with the sort of selection process. So it's really more about it walking a journey with schools and getting them to the point where they're ready, or working with schools that are already, ready and excited about bringing technology into their learning spaces.
That's an incredible answer, and thanks so much for unpacking that, because the big thing is not just about giving everyone a broadband connection. It's about making sure that they're utilizing that for the good, number one, and making sure that they're truly leveraging that to have an impact that we desire from a skills upliftment perspective. I mean, that's so true. So I've got to fix something. So Samir, apologies. I introduced you as the wrong person. I'm going to introduce you, I promise you, as the right person now. So Tshikululu Social Investments has a firm focus on opportunities for education that creates for economic development of young people. So Samir, can you speak to us about the importance of education on the social investment and agenda front, and how education can be used as a tool to maximize the power of social investment in this particular space?
Right, thank you. And good morning, everyone. Research consistently shows that there's positive returns to education. I think in today's economy, we're constantly having to upskill and learn new ways of working to participate in the world of work. And for the social investment agenda, historically, corporate social investment and investors have always had education on its strategic agenda, from ECD to early learning all the way up to post-school education. But what we've learned over the last 20 years is that to maximize that investment and to maximize the power of investing in young people, we have to carefully consider the context in which they're operating and how we invest. We have to carefully consider the mechanisms that are available for us for the investment, both those that are tried and tested as well as innovative mechanisms that are new. And with that comes a healthy appetite for risk. So, for example, when looking at how to create pathways into the economy for needs in a rural mining sector, we had worked with our client and realized that investing in tourism and conservation is an opportunity to invest in the economy, invest in these young people without necessarily having to relocate them out of their homes, out of the rural communities in which they live. And so working with our client, this investor made a very contextually relevant decision, decided to take a demand-led approach to the investment and leverage the need for field guides in the conservation industry to train youth to become field guides. The mechanism we used, we had a competitive process where we worked with and solicited bids from training organizations to do this. Ultimately, we chose a solution that provides both the practical as well as the immersive on the ground in the field training experience for these young learners. So that is, they in the field, they learning how to utilize the equipment, how to make critical decisions when working in the field, working with animals, becoming very used to the environment that they would be in their day-to-day living and the complexities and challenges that come with that. And they supported throughout their training to make good decisions, to become self-driven, to be able to manage themselves in the field. And the risk is, with the investors that we work with, we chose to extend the duration of the study and allow for this field work. And what comes out of that is that there's a 90% placement rate for students that go through this course. And so you de-risk the investment by investing just a little longer in developing core competencies, so just that little extra. And so there's a high demonstration that placement rates are possible if you think about innovative ways of supporting students. And we always say that in COVID has taught us that psychosocial support for bursary students is critical. It's an absolute need. And in training young students as field guides, we've also coupled and introduced psychosocial support. And what that showed, the skills like time management, the skills like networking, how to become self-driven. And these are critical skills that you can leverage and support students on. And maybe bringing it more closely to the digital space, Tshikululu has its own research on how South Africa's education sector is preparing for the fourth industrial revolution. And one of our, the research showed that investing in the capacity of the education ecosystem, which is something that Sizwe spoke to, and I will go into, is critical. But again, I would say it does require a healthy appetite for risk. It does require exploring all the mechanisms available, and context is critical.
Right. I mean, what you unpacked there in terms of psychosocial support, I think at the end of the day, when we talk about all this technology and we talk about all this stuff, the other things that we need to be very cognizant of is the humanities aspect of this, right? These are human beings we're connecting. These are human beings that we're uplifting and making sure that they've got the right character, etc. Because these tools, as much as they are tools for the good that we aspire them to be, can be tools that can be dystopian. So I love that. I love that balance from an investment view perspective. Nkolo, the Sasol Foundation. Let me introduce you folks. You're catalyzing positive change in education. Tell us a little bit more about the foundation, your approach to education, and your view relative to the subject matter today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Program Director, and thank you to my fellow panelists and our partners, Tshikululu Social Investment and Sifiso EdTech. It is really an honor and privilege to be part of this panel as a sustainable development specialist that doesn't come from the education development space. The year that I've spent leading the Sasol Foundation team has taught me a lot. And Sasol's approach to education development is to invest in the entire value chain in education, starting from ECD, because of the criticalness of ensuring that the learners we support and fund and the communities we support are coming from the right foundation, because more often than not, you cannot fix challenges at matric level that were missed at early childhood development level. So we have 4 pillars, from ECD to investing in STEM in schools, technical education, and a big portion of our investment goes into both undergrad and postgraduate funding studies. And as Samira was saying, the importance of psychosocial support, especially having just come out of the pandemic, can never be overemphasized. And we ensure we have this in all our programs. And the biggest thing actually for us as the foundation in the past couple of years is ensuring alignment of what is offered, especially at technical education, alignment to industry needs. So we are forever checking our value proposition to Sasol as our founder and what would be the business's needs today, especially skills and workforce needs, and the needs of the future as well, because we want to make our own contribution to a future or a future ready or a future smart Sasol. So the alignment of curriculum to industry needs is very, very important to us. That is why we're one of the biggest investors in the country in supporting the DBE in coding and robotics curriculum development. It's not cheap, but we know it's a huge investment that is aligned to what our businesses' needs will be, and as well as to the needs of the country. And I would also love to emphasize even more, actually, because as I'm listening to my fellow panelists, I am very much reminded of Professor Marwala's words when we had the Sasol TechnoX in September, which is one of our biggest careers exhibition in science in the country. And he was emphasizing that we're going to need a really multi-dimensional skilled kind of young people in the future. And we have to invest now in those skills to ensure that the opportunities that are coming with the rise in machine learning, that our young people are not left behind. And I would want to mention quite a few of these, because it's not only about technology skills and digital literacy, critical thinking, communication, creativity, problem solving. I've heard quite a few of my panelists, fellow panelists mentioning this: perseverance, collaboration, information literacy, media literacy, global awareness, self-direction, social skills, literacy skills, civic literacy, social responsibility, and innovation skills. And in our need not only for just ordinary impact in our programs, but also to contribute to systemic change. I remember in our strategy review session earlier this year, one of the experts highlighting to us that for the systemic change we want to contribute into, we cannot do it alone. We need partners. Hence, it's so important for us, these kind of partnerships with TSI and Sifiso Group. We have a very strong partnership with the Kagiso Trust as well. We have a very strong partnership on research on relevant low carbon economy research with the NRF. And we are pursuing a partnership with the NECT, and we open to a few more because we realize in the sustainable development space, even competing companies in core business cannot afford to compete given the challenges our country is going through. We need more and more impactful collaborations in order to really significantly move the needle and ensure that, because the pandemic fully highlighted the politics of inequality in our country and the politics of access, and it pushed us to innovate as far as digital education is concerned. And we need all the partners, relevant partners that are able to contribute in the system, to work together. So yeah, it's a big push for strategic, impactful collaborations, but ensuring that we preparing now for a future-ready learners and future-ready companies and communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ngola. It's so encouraging to hear all of this. Tsaliki, I want to come back to you. I hear of private initiatives around uncapped bandwidth. We listen to social investments happening in the space to ensure that we have a more a closed circle around the idea of SASL and their view and private sector. What is the political will and what is the political framework to support all of these private investments? Is it there? I mean, is government truly there to support this and bring this all together? Because at the end of the day, if legislation doesn't keep up with this, if governmental support doesn't lean in, and if leadership doesn't step up in that regard, a lot of this becomes a whole lot harder for us. So give us just the governmental view, the educational view, from your perspective relative to all of these private initiatives.
Thank you once more. The government has made pronouncement through our political leaders. The president, in a number of State of the Nation addresses, he spoke on these issues, including the introduction of new subjects that are going to be responsive to the demands of the job market, like coding and robotics, for instance. The president spoke about it in the SONA, giving direction that this need to happen. The minister took it further and in the budget speech spoke about this and indicated the commitment of the Department of Education, came up with clear targets of what you're going to do, by when, how many teachers are going to be trained, when the curriculum is going to be concluded. This is the political will of government. When it comes to bring about connectivity, the government has pronounced on implementation of SA Connect, for instance, as a policy of government to bring connectivity to government institutions, including schools, clinics, as well as police stations. And these were followed by policy developments by relevant government departments to take further what our political principals had pronounced. So my answer to, is there a political will? The answer is yes. There is a political will, and our politicians are willing to grab the bull by its horns and provide political direction on what needs to happen. And it is up to the bureaucrats then to take this further. And there's progress that we are reporting in terms of what our political principles pronounced on. There are a number of policies and frameworks that we have developed. The policy on the curriculum policy on coding and robotics, we have developed this, and we did this in partnership with SASO, like my colleagues Knox indicated. They invested heavily in assisting us to ensure that we are at the point where we are. They are not the only ones. Microsoft, Standard Bank. Right now, we are working with CFISO Learning Group to mobilize resources to ensure that we pilot this coding and robotics. So there is willingness on government to work with these partners that are making these pronouncements. And we really are willing to accept other innovative ways. And I'm listening to Sioban on the presentation that she's making in terms of uncapping the nation. And I'm sitting and say, wow, this is so exciting. And these are the type of initiatives that we want and we welcome as government. So the political will is there. We acknowledge that government doesn't have enough money to implement all these programs en masse. And it is for that reason that we will need partners. And we have signed an agreement with FISO Learning Group, who have graciously offered to assist us to mobilize resources from industry. And they have made some amazing progress in terms of supporting us. I received a report about 2 weeks ago about the work that they have done. So we welcome all the partners, all South Africans, industry, to assist us to implement all this program. When we developed the curriculum, we had to draw on the knowledge and expertise of industry because we knew very little about coding and robotics. We did not have specialists within basic education on coding and robotics. So we had to draw from the knowledge of experts, industry leaders, to come and tell us what is that industry is expecting from us. What is that we need to teach the children? So these valuable insights were then incorporated in the curriculum as we have it now. And we are in the process of finalizing it. And we have a clear implementation plan of when we are going to bring this to scale. It is not an easy thing. Curriculum reform is not an easy thing for any government. It will always have its own challenges, particularly like Suban indicated, where there are huge inequalities. Dealing with those inequalities are going to be very critical, but we are not going to wait until we remove all of them before we move. We need to design the curriculum, and we have designed it in such a way that it can be implemented in affluent schools, in township schools, in rural schools, so that nobody is left behind, including unplugged approaches where you don't necessarily need internet for you to teach coding and robotics.
Right. Excellent answer. Siobhan, I want to come back to you quick and just, you've heard that there's governmental will. I think out of all the panelists here today, if I take a look at your business model and I take a look at who you are, it's, I don't know how much funding there is behind it. I don't know how much you need from a capitalistic, business plan perspective. But when you hear what Saliki's saying there, what's your thoughts around your success, and what's the stuff that stands in your way as an entity to deliver, this uncapped free internet out there?
Sure. So, I think it does come back to the word partnerships. Ultimately, we need everyone to be doing their bit to make this come to fruition. And there are different partners. There are implementation partners who actually do the work. As Project ECs, where we always say, we're the connectivity partner. We're not an education expert organization. We have educational expertise. We have some capacity to enable the educational processes and to support educational processes in school, but we need partners enabled, like by the Cecil Foundation, Tshikululu. We need all of these programs to come together and to be able to deliver in very, very challenged contexts. There are, I always say there are like 28,000 schools in South Africa and no two are the same. There are thousands of teachers and no two are the same. And it's the same for learners. When you think about differentiation and the importance to be able to include every single learner in the learning journey, that's a very, very difficult job to do. And we're only going to do it through very strong partnerships. So in terms of things that stand in our way, I mean, obviously, funding is critical. The more money that becomes available for us to implement Wi-Fi, be it free or uncapped in various communities and in various schools, the more we can do. I think where we need closer alignment, and I think this is sort of speaks to the government stance and the ability to match policy or to align policy or develop policy in such a way that it enables the partners and it enables the collaborations in a more free-flowing way. So, for example, I mentioned earlier that, in majority of schools, learners are still prohibited to bring devices to school, right? And there are many good reasons for that. It's very disruptive for teachers to have to deal with devices. It's very disruptive for learners, and it puts them at risk if they have to carry devices to school on public transport, and then, they can... there's violence out there, and they can be mugged and that sort of thing. So there are huge risks around learners bringing devices to school. But we need the policies to progress around when that is appropriate. We need leadership to think about, okay, if we've got a mathematics app and if we have internet connectivity, or even if it's an offline process and kids get a little bit of access to download an app once a month and update those, the sort of updates that are required, and importantly, to get the measurements that come along with what technology and education can enable, can learners then bring their devices to school and bring them out in this mathematics lesson? Or can we do it in this business studies class where we going to make a video and do something like project-based learning? So it's really around getting the policies to evolve in such a way that it makes it easier for partners to implement. The other area that's been spoken about quite a lot is capacitating educators. And I think, having been a teacher in schools across the board, having worked in many sort of township and rural schools, but also in some private and affluent schools, there's a massive discrepancy between teachers' confidence levels and teachers' skills in being able to utilize technology. And I think the role of sort of the more localized departments of education at provincial level is really to empower educators to feel confident, to grow their own skills, to walk their own journeys with technology so that they can be empowered in schools to feel confident, to say, okay, bring your phones to school tomorrow and I'm going to try and let you set up a group where we can collaborate a little bit more, or we're going to do an exercise in critical thinking utilizing a slide deck or whatever resources and, resources that they have on hand. So I think those little things could go a long way to making a difference in the work that we do and to enable us, to empower us to do things better and to do more in the schools and the classrooms where we're currently set up.
Thank you for that, Sabon. So, Lika, hopefully you're taking notes over there. You're recording this somehow. I'm gonna flick over to Samir. Just in closing, Samir, just give us your closing thoughts around a question that popped up, and it's something that really I've also made a note of is that support that you provide, that psychosocial support. You spoke about the field guides. How do you go about implementing that psycho support? And do you partner with folks that are more focused in those particular areas, or do you deliver that more organically? You give us your closing remarks with that as the angle to it.
So I'll go to an example where Tshikululu supported a client to roll out a comprehensive bursary program. And this was targeted at needs and at the missing middle in very specific geographical areas and rural communities. So the contextual considerations were that we screened applicants, more than 1,000 applicants from 500 rural villages. And the students had the choice of institution to study. So TVETs made up 50% of the institutions and universities made up the other 50%. And psychosocial support was very deliberately built in as a critical success factor. And Tshikululu proactively worked with a range of service providers. And we found a provider that could provide all students access throughout the duration of the academic year with psychosocial support. And so when these students are thrust into a life of campus, into this campus life, which is very different, they learn how to manage their own time. They learn how to develop new habits to promote self-management, managing impulsivity, managing how to network, we held their hand through the accommodation, through understanding and getting the faculty requirements that they needed. And this bursary program also gave access to certain students who required it. They had formal therapy made available to the students who needed it. So these continuous check-ins with the students also allowed us to closely monitor the academic performance and proactively identify students who were at risk of not completing the academic year. And so we're working with our client to see how do we support these students and possibly bring in a tutoring aspect to the bursary. To ensure that these learners have a successful year of study and that they can continue their studies into 2023 and 2024. And so the strategies that and the partnerships that we create ensure that investment strategies of our investors are flexible, they're agile, and they're student-centered. And that, everyone spoke about collaboration. We really do work with partners and understand that you've got to build the ecosystem and you've got to work very collaboratively to ensure that the student has all the needs that are met. I don't know if that answers the question.
I like it. As a technologist myself, we talk so much about technology, and I almost feel like the subject matter that you're touching on is the stuff that we need to speak more. I think we lean so deeply into the geeky side of things, into the pure skill side of things, and we talk about the bits and the bytes, but what we forget is that there's a human being behind this. And I think if we want to have non-dystopian outcomes in the future, I think it is understanding that we need to grow people up with proper character, that have an understanding that, the skill set that you have embeds itself in a broader societal aspect of things. And I think that you provide there is so important. Tolo, I'm going to kind of end with you and give us your closing thoughts. I love what you said about Cecil aligning, the capability that you have to take folks into the market, to provide them resources, etc., but really looking at the market from a skills identification perspective. Just in closing, tell us, how do you align that? And what do you see as the top skill requirement out there? When we talk about robotics and coding, can you chisel it down to more specifics that you're seeing in industry today around the needs? What particular skills can these kids think of in terms of jobs that are out there that you're crafting and directing the current of the water towards?
Program director, that's not a very easy question, because this is a sector where we are all really finding our way and learning. But I think in the future, we're going to need really strong collaborators among young people, no matter whether you're an engineer or you're a medical practitioner or you're an environmentalist or you're a coder that's going to assist us in working with these machines or robots that we're going to work with in the future. We're going to need young people that work well with people. We're going to need young people that are strong collaborators, that have really, really amazing people skills, that are strong negotiators as well, and that are able to work across function in companies and not really sort of one-dimensional and too specialized. For example, we're going to need doctors that are very tech-savvy, because they're going to have to be able to actually do surgeries with machines. So there's a lot that is still to be researched in these areas. But one thing I feel didn't come across very strongly in our panel, we're going to need a lot of teachers and lecturers. I do want to encourage young people to consider teaching, and also encourage our government to look at the teaching profession and the incentives and remuneration of it differently. We are in severe shortage of the right technical and digital teachers, and we're going to need them even more. And they need to be incentivized properly. And I even think at times maybe we need a very strong collaboration where we even have industry experts who are able to teach at the same time until the time where we have the right numbers, but also teaching incentivized enough so that we don't lose critical teachers to industry, because it's happening a lot currently. So I do want to encourage young people to consider teaching well and be great negotiators and collaborators who are tech savvy. Thank you very much.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much to each one of you. I think the views are so varied. The environment from which you come from is so different, yet so cohesive in terms of addressing this problem overall. Getting our kids uplifted, getting them skilled up, but not just making them skilled human beings, making them all-rounded human beings that understand their place in society, that understands that the assistance that we've given them, it's a pay-forward model. I love this. I think it's a massive opportunity. I think it is government. I think it is investments that give freely, folks that look at character building, folks that look at it from an industry perspective. If these things come together, we start building a fabric and a substrate that allows our latent human potential to be uplifted and to take our step into this new opportunity that lays ahead of us. So we don't get disintermediated, but we actually leverage it. So thanks so much to our panelists. Up next, we're going to have Kolisa will take us through the enablers that make it possible to effectively use education and skills development to drive pathways into the economy. Looking forward to this. Welcome, Kolisa.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be joining you and getting a chance to actually speak about enablers and cracking the code. My talk will be based on the experience that we've had at Future Nation Schools. We've been running our coding and robotics. We call it computing at the schools for about 6 years now. And we've learned a number of lessons while going through it. The presentation will mostly just speak about the challenges we've met and how we've overcome them, how we've identified enablers. And listening to the panel before, they've made very important statements, one of which is the shortage of teachers. We've said a lot of times just needing teachers, where we ended up having to come up with a strategy of actually empowering interns and managing those interns to enable us to be able to teach coding and robotics across the whole spectrum. I'll be starting with my presentation shortly. Okay, so as we look at the enablers, I first think we need to look at the barriers to coding and robotics and its adoption. And we've identified 4 of the most key ones. The cost of acquiring the equipment. Robotics and coding is expensive, and that's one reality we need to just face up with. From just creating the curriculum to acquiring the tablets or computers that you're going to use. And when you then add in robotics into the mix, the cost gathers up really quickly. Teacher capacity is another one. You need to train the teachers. Very few teachers come from varsity already knowing how to teach coding and robotics. It's a different subject. Not only are you just looking at the content, but there is classroom management, there's lab management. When you add robots to the mix, there's also parts management and ordering the spares and all of that. So teacher capacity is something else to deal with. Then there's community perception. I remember when we started with coding and robotics, most people thought it was just a nice to have, an extramural. Some parents felt students were just wasting their time. It's the community, and by community, sometimes doesn't think of it as an important skill. So that's one of the barriers. And as we look at what we were implementing when we started, we surveyed from across the, and when we started 6 years ago, there were other schools around the country that had a variation of coding and robotics. It just seemed like everyone had their own flavor, and it just wasn't mainstream. I remember the first year we had to tell students that computing is going to show up on your report, and students would then need to focus on it. The more mainstream you make it, the more attention that it gathers from the students. Okay, so how do we enable it? How do we make it happen for more people? The first point would be making it more accessible. Robotics options are emerging. There's more affordable options that are emerging. There are more unplugged options that are emerging. And those are opening up the space and making it more accessible. Device prices need to be lowered, and schools need to look at acquiring refurbished PCs. I've seen a lot of people go the tablet route. Tablets are cool, but I feel desktop PCs have a more permanent space. Having an established lab just brings more formality to the subject, and not just the formality, it's a bit easier to manage. With tablets, sometimes they grow legs, and just managing them becomes a sheer nightmare. There's also virtual robotic options that are emerging, where students can still learn the aspects or the knowledge of robotics without actually having to have physical robots. This option is great, but sometimes students just miss out on the technical aspect. They're building the robot up, getting to test it, getting to test the structure of the robot, but it's better than not having any access at all. One of the other things that enable successful implementation is offering support materials to teachers. And what I mean by that is training the teachers. I've had a number of interactions with teachers, and most of training is a once-off thing. So people will come in and say, for 5 days, we are taking you on a deep dive on how to use a certain product. Or for 5 days, we're doing HTML, or we're doing Java with the teachers. But the continuous aspect of it, the continuous support, is something that's really necessary. The learning is not something that can happen in 1 week, and teachers need to be assured that as they go through the process of learning, they can call somebody, they can have access to a group of other teachers who are experiencing the same things, who are learning the same things, creating that space where you are free to learn. Another thing that is quite necessary, helping teachers establish their own personal goals and milestones. A lot of new coding and robotics teachers, when they get introduced to the subject, they're told that we've just bought robots and next week we are entering a competition. Giving somebody expectations that are that big may make people actually shy away from the subject. Enabling the teacher to have their own personal goals, have their own milestones, and reach their personal goals as they go along. That helps the teachers. Offering lesson plans, as was mentioned by some of the speakers previously, there isn't readily available material. So those lesson plans, those PowerPoints, those portals, videos, websites, and assessment, because you realize as you start teaching the subject that it's not a easy, we will write a cycle test and you would have sufficiently tested the knowledge. There's different assessments. There are projects that students need to do. There are rubrics that apply to the project. It's not a blanket I am marking for a group, but even the marking needs to be quite different, and developing those assessments takes some time. And training and developing interns to support the teachers. We have realized that coding and robotics as a subject has more admin, right? So not only are you managing the class, but you're also managing a lab, and you're also managing stock. And it is mostly helpful to have an intern that's assisting you with the other duties, so you can actually focus on teaching the students. Another key enabler is personalizing and gamifying the learning. Especially with robotics, there is this whole element of robotics competitions. It helps with engagement. It makes the class such a fun space. There's always screaming and shouting and all those nice interactions when students start working with the robots and competing. But that can also be a barrier to some other students who feel like they are not at that level yet. It might actually get them to say coding and robotics as a subject is not for them. And we need to be very careful of that. So part of the strategy that we employ is, as we get gear up to those challenges, those class challenges, we help students set up personal milestones. So we celebrate when they get their robotic vehicle moving. We celebrate when it's going forward. We celebrate when it's going back. Those slight turns, we celebrate those. So building up the skill to get them ready to participate in broader competition. Because a lot of people just feel that it's not for them, because we then put up this big challenge as something that's at the beginning. So experience points like you'd get when you are learning to play a new game, they help a lot with the class. And having self-guided play-based learning. So they set up their milestones and they get to celebrate when they set up their milestones. And that just requires a different approach to teaching, and things that might have been scheduled for 3 or 4 weeks sometimes end up taking 6 weeks. And having that flexibility to move things around and being able to catch up also after creating that flexibility is a skill that's very necessary for somebody who will be teaching coding and robotics. Another enabler is early exposure. We've learned that starting robotics earlier has a great advantage. Children that are younger don't have that fear. They don't have that fear to be perfect. They're more willing to learn. They celebrate little things. They don't have the added extra stress of, this is going to break on me. I'm not going to be able to do this. So they're willing to give it a chance. They're willing to give it a try. They're willing to engage with the material. It's fun. It's a game. It's a joyous experience for them. And that early exposure to STEAM makes children more eager to participate in science. And science as a whole, from kids who are just doing simple science experiments in the kitchen. Those kids are more likely to then grow up and be scientists than kids that are now having to do an experiment when they're in grade 10. It just seems a lot more scary. So the stakes are lower for younger children. They're more brave. They're more willing to learn from their mistakes and experimentation. And that's the greatest age to get them. That's the greatest age to get them to participate in competitions. That's the greatest age to get them to be more creative. Kids are more creative because they haven't learned the societal barriers to things. They haven't learned what perfection looks like, and they're more willing to create. One of the things that the coding and robotics curriculum comes with, and we should make work, is that ability to create. We've got enough people who are using technology, and the type of people we're trying to raise up are not just mere users of technology, but they are people who are going to create solutions. There are people who are going to come up with new innovations. There are people and kids are more open to innovation. Another enabler is hands-on learning. Coding and robotics is not a subject that you can just learn from a textbook. It needs to be practical. So in terms of building the code and testing the code, there's some sheer joy and excitement the first time kids write a program and it runs as expected. So making it practical, less talk. Teachers should only really be coming into the class to introduce the concepts and getting students to learn the concepts and experiment with the concepts. We've been able to do this a lot because we've adopted a project-based learning approach. And one thing that we do, and one thing that is a culture amongst the whole school, kids know that they're learning skills to add on to the project. So they're not doing a project at the end of learning, but as they are learning, they're learning skills that they can incorporate into the project. It gives them something tangible to look forward to. So there's a product at the end. The skills that they've learned can be applied onto the project. And a lot of the learning actually happens after the final product, when they get to sit down and critically evaluate their research and learn from it. How kids need to collaborate and evaluate the learning afterwards when they've worked on projects together. It brings that as a vehicle to be able to say, okay, we worked well here, we didn't work well here. How do we change our strategy the next time we approach it? Another key enabler is encouraging representation. And that comes in encouraging all adoption from all the teachers. So making sure that all the teachers are represented, making sure that your robotics staff or coding and robotics teachers, males, females, young, old, so that there isn't that bias, right? Training more female teachers and upskilling and supporting them. There is this unspoken reality that a lot of coding and robotics teachers are male, and when they get into the class, sometimes female students just exempt themselves from learning, right? They think it's not for them. Encouraging a mind shift, having teachers that are female being leaders of those spaces, encouraging more young girls to compete in competitions and build their confidence.